everyone, and welcome to another episode of Growing Kentucky's Leaders, a podcast from the Kentucky FFA Foundation. I am Sheldon McKinney, the Executive Director.
And I'm Ruth Ann Fink, the Development Officer.
We have a wonderful guest today. It is the Chairman of the Kentucky FFA Foundation, Mr. Nick Carter. Say hello so they can hear your voice.
Hi, it's great to be here. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, we are so happy to have Nick. Nick has worn a lot of hats, and everywhere I go, people know Nick Carter. He is a past Kentucky FFA state officer, University of Kentucky alum, a veteran, an attorney, a retired co-industry executive. But to us and to me here at the Kentucky FFA Foundation, he is a friend, an incredible donor, a leader, a volunteer, and he's the chairman of our board. Nick, lots of people might be listening. Maybe they're in high school, maybe they're donors, who knows? But tell them a little bit about what the board of the Kentucky FFA Foundation does and what your role as chairman consists of.
Well, we have a fairly large board, but our organization is really unbelievable in the way we get work done on behalf of FFA members. And that's what we're doing. We're not running a board. We're working on behalf of FFA members, trying to raise the money that they need to be as successful as they can be. But we're very fortunate that about 3 or 4 years ago, our board was reorganized. Then again, a little bit last year, but the board was reorganized. The committee structure was reorganized. Everybody on the board only serves on one committee. They are highly efficient. They get to pick which one they want to be on, so they can't complain they don't want to be on that committee. They're doing what they want to do and what they feel like they can contribute the most to. And our board meetings consist of committee reports in large part, and the committees work hard to make the board efficient and to make it useful to all of the members that are there. So my job is to keep it between the fences as the board chairman, and I also try to encourage everybody to give Sheldon and Ruth Ann and I contacts that we can contact about giving to act as an ambassador for FFA and for the foundation out in the larger community.
Sure. So just as FFA members are learning and practicing parliamentary procedure and how to run effective meetings at the local level, that's what the FFA Foundation Board is doing. And we've just gathered people of leadership and influence to help raise the most money and make the most impact for those local leaders.
Yeah, right. We're so fortunate to have such a great board. Everyone has their unique skills that they bring to the table. And I get to work with the Fund Development Committee quite a bit, and I like to call them my voice of reason in a lot of ways. They're as a whole, it's a great board that we get to work with. But Nick, we do want to talk about your FFA experience some. We could start from the very beginning, back at the Hustonville FFA Chapter, but I think we should begin by talking about your FFA experience kind of from looking back. So tell our listeners, how did FFA help prepare you for some of your biggest moments in life?
Well, I've had a wonderful career and a wonderful life. And when I look back on it, I can trace all of the great things that happened to me back to FFA. I came to UK scared to death that I was not going to make it, not going to be a good enough student. Many of the kids from my school who had been there the last 4 or 5 years before that had not become sophomores. And so they didn't make it, and they went somewhere else, or they took a job or did something. So I was scared to death. And so, but I knew a lot of people at UK because of my involvement in FFA. That was the year I was serving as a state officer. So I went there with friends and actually with friends who set big goals for themselves. And so that helped me set big goals for myself. And so beginning of my sophomore year, I pledged to fraternity, and that fraternity later on, a couple of years later, talked me into running for a student council. And there weren't members from the Ag College on student council very much at that point in time. And so I ran and was lucky enough to get elected. I was headed to either Purdue or Cornell, one or the other, for Ag Econ PhD and becoming a professor, and in my mind, hopefully becoming U.S. Secretary of Agriculture sometime. But by virtue of serving on student council, I realized all the rest of them were going to law school, and they weren't any smarter than I was. And if they could go to law school, maybe I could go to law school. And so I went over and talked to the dean, who said that he had ag students before and they'd done really well, and urged me to apply. So I did, and I ended up going to law school instead of graduate school. And from there, my entire career, the job that I had where we did an IPO, where we went public, where I got to ring the bell at the stock exchange and all of those things, they were looking for a lawyer, and they were looking, and it was a land management company. And so, they thought my ag background would help too. I'm not sure how much it helped, since we only owned the minerals, but at least I understood what it was all about.
I think you have to share. How does one get to ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange?
Well, I rang the bell on our 10th anniversary of being a publicly traded company, and we had scheduled that well in advance, and I was asked by the founder of the company to ring the bell that day, and so I got to push. You actually push a button. You don't ring the bell.
Insider scoop here.
You push a button, and there are enough amateurs up there who push buttons that you push the button and they have 30 seconds to make a correction if you screwed something up. And so, but I was there with my management team from Huntington, West Virginia, and Eastern Kentucky, and we got to stand on the dais and push the button and ring the bell. It's one of my favorite pictures that I have in my home right now, is us ringing the bell.
Well, you'll have to send us that picture so we can share that too. But I think what is so meaningful about your stories, you would have been successful no matter what you did. That's just your personality. But you got to UK, you did all these things. A blue jacket was behind a lot of those doors that opened. It got you going. It got your start. It gave you some skills to keep going.
Right.
And so think about what would have happened. What would happen to me if I didn't have an ag teacher who said, this is what you need to go and do. This is the opportunity. And so FFA is doing that for generations, and it matters.
Yeah. And I'm not sure, I had a weird experience in high school in that in a one teacher program, I had 4 ag teachers in 4 years. 4 different ones. And so, I didn't have a lot of continuity between teachers, but each one of them poured different things into me.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you are a very generous donor to the Kentucky FFA Foundation. And in fact, you started an endowment for your hometown. The Hustonville FFA Chapter is now part of Lincoln County FFA. And so what we do is, the money in that endowment, we give 5% back locally to that chapter to just make sure that finances aren't a barrier for a student to get to participate in FFA. But your giving has inspired a lot of other people to give back in a meaningful way with their talent, their time, and their treasure. I know that you don't just give money. I know that you spend many nights coaching teams and listening to students and taking them to dinner. What has been that experience of giving back locally been like for you?
Wow, that's I've had the most wonderful retirement, because, and I was really a little scared of retirement, but because I didn't know, I knew I didn't function well with not anything to do. So I FFA and finding the foundation and becoming active, and particularly making the donation to Lincoln County and them including me in their family down there has been just a wonderful thing that's happened to me. I absolutely love going to Lincoln County and coaching speaking contest, or listening to parliamentary procedure and making comments, or giving the speech at the annual meeting, or the first annual meeting each year. I gave a speech this year that I've had, I don't know how many thank you notes from the kids and from their parents. The title of the speech was, "You're in the right place." And I pointed out all the reasons they ought to be in ag classes and FFA and what it could mean to them if they were and if they were active in the organization. And so it's just been wonderful. It's like in addition to my own family, I get to participate in a lot of other families, and I've met kids there who are so impressive to me, and it gives me faith in the future of America to know that there are kids out there like the ones that I get to work with.
It is your family, you know, that's the hometown that you grew up in and where you got your start. And I think what a great story and living testament for those students to get to see, like, this is someone who really invested his time in FFA and was successful and is now able to give back. And that's so great that you get to share that with them. It's really special.
If I can have an influence on one child, everything that I've done, the money that I've given, the time that I give, everything is worthwhile.
Well, you've done that tenfold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Nick, we know that when our listeners now know you're the chairman of our board, and something special about that is you really get to see all the things that happen backstage at the Kentucky FFA Foundation. And, you know, you get to see the decisions that are being made and the programs that are being developed and all the people that are working towards that, on that impact that it provides for members. I think you should share with our listeners why they should support the Kentucky FFA Foundation and why they should be confident in that support, seeing what you've seen being backstage.
If you're out there and FFA had any impact on you, and I'm sure if you were a member and you participated at all, it has had an impact on you. I've talked to at least hundreds of people who, when they find out I'm involved with FFA, tell me about their involvement and what it meant to them. And you know, Sheldon and I have met with people who are just effusive about what FFA has meant to them. I can tell you that if you contribute to the Kentucky FFA Foundation, you are getting a group of people to oversee the money that you contribute and to distribute it in the right places in the most professional manner that you could possibly imagine. We have professional investment managers who are taking great care of our money. We just topped $7 million in our endowments this year. And we use the money, but we also attempt to grow the money for future generations. And everybody on that board is cognizant of our fiduciary duty to the donors and are so thankful for the donors. You know, you all just completed your sponsors tour the first week of January across the state of Kentucky. And I'm sure that the state officer team that was with you came away with an added appreciation for the sponsors that we have and the impact that they want to have on youth of Kentucky. One of the reasons that I've chosen to be involved is I'm very, very concerned about the future of America, and I believe in my heart that the values of rural America, as exemplified by what FFA is all about, can be the salvation of our country. If you have leadership based on faith and hard work and good values, then we're going to be in better shape than I think we would be otherwise.
That's an inspiring task, Nick. And that's what the FFA Creed says. You know, I can do my part in that inspiring task. And so FFA members, you know, listen up. We need you. People are giving back and supporting you because we desperately need good leadership and a good future of the agriculture industry and so much more. And Nick, you've certainly done your part in that.
You know, I'm not talking about we're all going to become president or we're all going to be Secretary of Agriculture. If you're president of or if you're involved and working with your local cattlemen's association, your local farm bureau, your local city or county commission or council, or you decide you want to run for mayor or county judge or maybe a state rep or whatever. We've had a lot of state representatives who are former FFA officers, both state officers and officers in their local chapters. So, you know, the training you get makes you available to do the things that need to be done in this country.
That's right. Yeah, you could go back and do anything. You could go be a great farmer who's engaged locally, you know, a great teacher. We need all those people. And so the FFA, we desperately need you. We do it. And Nick, we need you all and donors like yourself to make it happen. And so thank you just so much for that time. We always ask our guests the same 3 questions to wrap it up. And so we're going to ask you the same thing. And I know this is a tough one because you've certainly had a lot of advice over the years, but what is the best piece of leadership advice that you have ever been given?
The company that I serve on the board of now is the largest coal mining company east of the Mississippi, one of the 2 or 3 largest in the country, and is widely respected in the industry. Mm-hmm. Internally within that company, we have a saying that it's who you're with. And I think I apply that to FFA too, because it's who you're with. It's what I told those kids in that speech I referred to earlier. It's who you're with that determine you. If you want to be a good person, you're not going to hang around a bunch of thugs. If you want to be a good student, you're not going to hang around the people who don't study and who don't apply themselves in school. If you want to be a good leader, you don't hang around with followers. You put yourself in a position to be with leaders. So it's who you're with. I did hear many years ago. In fact, it was one of the years that I was the chairman of the state chamber in West Virginia. I heard Lou Holtz give a speech there, Coach Lou Holtz, and the whole tenor of his speech was based around 3 facts. Facts as he saw them, facts as I see them. Do what's right, do the best you can, and show people you care. Because if you do those things, that will develop trust and caring, and those are necessary for leadership.
Oh, yeah,
so,
great.
Yeah.
I think about
a wonderful piece.
It's who you're with when it comes to FFA and especially our foundation board, you know, and people like you. Ruth Ann and I are surrounded by big thinkers, big leaders in the industry who really think that we can get things done and are positive minded. And that really makes us be that way too. It is about who you're with. And it's fun to be with people who don't put a ceiling on what's possible.
Yeah.
Followers don't raise $1.5 million for the kids.
Oh, that's good.
Well, one thing we always ask our guests as well is, Nick, you know, we're all about philanthropy here. And one avenue of philanthropy is your time, right? Like investing time in people. So we want to give all of our guests on the podcast an opportunity to call out someone that has really invested their time in you. And who would that be for you? Who do you want to call out right now?
Well, he probably wouldn't think that he's invested a lot of time in me, but his example has certainly served as a role model for me. And that would be Joe Kraft, who is the chairman of the board of the company that I serve on the board of. Joe and I have been friends for 50 years. He's the guy who I went through law school with, who ended up hiring me into the coal industry. And then I left his company and went on to run another company. He's rung the bell also. And so He is a wonderful donor, a wonderful philanthropist, has built both of the training facilities at UK for the football team and the basketball team, has contributed in many, many, many other ways to UK, helping to buy ambulances so they can serve East Kentucky. He was very, very deeply involved in raising the money and giving the money to replace housing in Knott County and Perry County and those areas when they were affected by the flood a couple of years ago. And he not only gives his money, he gives of his time also. He spends a lot of time with the football players and the basketball players and the coaches and everything, trying to help them in a multitude of ways. But he also spends time at the Craft Institute, which he formed at Morehead State, and in all of the other charitable things that he's involved in.
Good to have friends that inspire you like that. And you all have been friends for a long time together. It's special that you're still so close.
We just passed our 50th anniversary, so it's been.
That's great.
We probably should not talk about each other very much. We might divulge things we shouldn't.
Yeah. Well, our last question for folks is, and I'm excited to hear your answer about this, but it's, what is something that you're loving right now that's helping you grow?
Well, one of the things that I did not have time to do when I was working was read as I wanted to. I believe that books are such a wonderful, wonderful source of knowledge. I call myself an intentional reader because I'm very careful about what I decide to read, and I want to make sure that if I'm going to spend the time, and if I had one skill that I don't have that I really would love to have, I'd like to be a much faster reader. But I plow through a lot of books, even though I'm not a speed reader by any stretch of the imagination. But I have just finished a number of books over the last year or so that have just given me so much insight into various aspects of my life. As you all know, I'm a huge fan of thoroughbred horse racing.
Yeah.
And so I've read 2 or 3 books this year. One actually is a novel, and I don't normally read novels, but John Paul Miller from here in Lexington wrote a novel about, it's entitled False Riches, and he based the book on his knowledge of what goes on at the racetracks. And it wasn't about the Lexington tracks. It was a track in Texas, but it was a fictional track, and I learned a lot about what goes on behind the scenes there. The last book I just read was the book about probably the greatest thoroughbred sire in the history of the industry, and the name of the horse was Lexington. Imagine that, and it has in its pedigree 13 of the 14 Triple Crown winners.
Oh, wow.
The last 12 horses of the year are part of its lineage. And then a book, there's 2 or 3 books that just over time, I've read Atlas Shrugged at least 3 or 4 times. I don't know exactly how many times. It's about time I read it again. That set my mind in where it is with regard to political philosophy and that kind of stuff at that. The biggest impactful book in my adult life has been the Big Book of AA. I'm a 35-year recovering alcoholic, and that book made possible everything else that's happened in my life. If I had not read that book and followed its warnings and advice, I wouldn't be where I am today. And then recently I read a book by Ray Dalio, who founded Bridgewater Associates, which runs the largest investments in the world. and its principles. And this guy is so smart that he kept a journal his entire life, and would write down principles and all of the subparts of the principles and how to accomplish them and all that. And it's just a wonderful book for those who are looking to improve themselves, or to be better at what they do.
We'll list those books in the show notes, but what I want our listeners to really hear from you and about this is you have not stopped growing. There has not been a point in your life where you went, oh, this is it. I'm the expert about all of these things. And, Nick, I've gotten the pleasure of getting to be with you at a lot of different places with influential people, and everyone comes up and they want to ask you about politics, energy, horse racing, or UK athletics. You are a expert in those categories, and you still keep learning more, and you still let new ideas challenge you. And I am so inspired by that. And when there are big questions that I have, or like, I want to talk about this, or how do I learn more about this? I can go to you, and you will always share some new insight of, I think that this would shape some of your ideas, or I think this is a good resource. And that really inspires me, that you have not stopped. You are continuing to grow as a person every day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you don't learn something every day you're alive, I'm not sure why you're alive. But there's so much to know out there. Just yesterday, Sheldon, I was talking to a person who is going to participate in extemporaneous speaking soon, and she indicated that she needed resources relating to the ag bill, the
farm bill,
the farm bill, and I was able to send her to a few resources just based on what I read, and that's not my wheelhorse at all, but it is something that I'm interested in. I think what you say is true because of the interest that I have in those things. If I wasn't interested in them, if my hobby wasn't handicapping horses, I wouldn't know anything about what goes on in the horse industry.
Right. Yeah.
But I can handicap horses and never bet on them and be perfectly happy if I do better than what I think the imaginary good better does. So it's a challenge, but it's worth it when you go to bed at night and say, oh yeah, I did that today and I've never done that before. I remember I read that earlier today, and that's something new I can put in my brain.
I think that's great advice. We have a lot of young listeners, and even all ages and walks of life. It's always good to keep learning, and whatever your interests are, let them be your interests and keep learning and make it your thing and take ownership of that, because it helps you grow as a person and makes for great conversations with people later on too.
Yes, you're exactly right, Ruth Ann.
Nick, you said it is all about who you're with, and that is just so true. I met you in 2017 for the first time, and now, 7 years later, I just can't imagine where FFA would be without you, what our board would be without you, and I'm just so grateful for who you are and what you've done for us. And so, FFA members, I hope if you ever get to see Nick out and about, I hope that you say hi and connect, and I'm just grateful for your time with us today.
Thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun, and I've learned something, so today's complete.
Yeah, great. Well, all thank you for joining us on this episode of Growing Kentucky Leaders. You can check back in next week. Growing Kentucky's Leaders is a podcast from the Kentucky FFA Foundation. The music has been performed by Bourbon County FFA member Joe Fritch. Production is provided by Isaiah Pruitt. Our artwork is by Julie Fritch Creative. Your hosts are Sheldon McKinney and Ruth Ann Fink, and you can find us on all social platforms at Kentucky FFA.